Sloshy.
And splish splash. That bad, huh?
Yeah, dude. I ate a lot of French dip today, and I regret it so bad.
Just a little too much indulgence.
Way too much, dude. Way too much.
So you're in a food coma almost.
Basically, dude.
That happens. That happens. I'm that way with barbecue. And Linda knows this. I'm that way with barbecue. I'm that way with ham, corned beef, and turkey, roast turkey. If we have that there, in the kitchen, in the fridge, wherever, I'm going to sit and nitpick at it. I won't make a sandwich. I'll just grab a bunch of pieces and just sit and eat as I'm doing whatever I'm doing. So, there's always a little extra cut just for that purpose, is what I'm getting at. So,
I mean, I figured the end of the world is coming, and I was at the corner store, and I saw that French dip canister sitting there. I said, you know what? Let's. But I didn't expect to keep dipping into it and keep going and going. And man,
yeah, let's deal with the elephant in the room. Today's your birthday. Happy birthday.
thank you.
And there's a little bit of indulgence that goes along with that.
Yeah,
Cake, ice cream, or just gluttony.
and
And
I regret it.
I did it on my birthday. We went to a local joint here and got pulled pork barbecue and just literally pigged out on pig. So I get it. I understand. But see, this is weird because you mentioned something to me earlier today about so many of us have birthdays in March. Today's your birthday, and Friday was my birthday. As we record this, it's Tuesday. So,
Yeah,
3, 4, 5 days ago. And there's a whole bunch of people that had birthdays this month. And it's kind of weird to look back because you're now, well,
old.
no, you're not old. You're 45. I mean, my kids are not much younger than that. So you're not old. Because if you're old, that makes me older. And I'm 59. So I'm, real close to senior discounts. But I don't feel like senior discounts. You know what I mean? It's one of those, geez, do I really want to admit that I'm getting that damn old things? You
It's a
know?
difficult thing because I mean, there is a timeline, and if you think of when you were a kid, if you thought of anybody that was even in their 30s, you
Mhm.
thought that they were like, I mean, at least I did, or we
Yeah.
did, that those people were ancient.
Yeah.
Anything past 18, we saw 18-year-olds as the adults in a way,
Mhm.
but just shy of being able to do everything, like drinking and whatnot, which came at 21. But as
Right.
far as like an 18-year-old, if you think back, was like, whoa, 18. And then if they were 21, that was already like out of reach. But
Yeah.
don't even throw 30, let alone 40
Oh yeah.
plus. It's just unrealistic.
I'm going through pictures here and scanning them into the computer and putting them on a specific hard drive that doesn't get used very much. It's a external drive. I'll plug it in, scan some pictures into it, unplug it, put it away. Then I'll gather more photos and kind of organize them. Then plug it in, scan them in, unplug it,
Yeah.
put it away. And I came across a picture of my grandmother on my mother's side holding me in her lap. And looking at the dates, now knowing here years later, I am older than she was when she was holding me in her lap for that picture. And I was about 4 years old. So, it's she was 41 when I was born. And you're older than my grandmother when I was born. I can't wrap my head around that. My daughter is older than my grandmother was when I was born. That's a hard one to wrap my head around, you know?
Yeah.
because to me, grandma and grandpa were ancient, you know, and they just weren't. So I don't
I
know,
mean,
man.
it's after doing, the whole genealogy thing,
Uh-huh.
and you start seeing everything within the context of, and it takes a little while, but you start seeing the age patterns and all that of one generation to the other, and you start placing your father at certain intervals in life,
Yeah.
as opposed to you and you now, and so on. You start to get a certain viewpoint of life,
Right.
um, and sort of the bookends in which it occurs,
Hmm.
and it's rapid fire.
Yeah. Big time.
It's rapid fire. It's not, you know, because I mentioned this in conversation privately and frankly, here, um, where, we have this thing, or at least this is my thought process, where we entertain ourselves
Hmm.
because in the meantime, let's say, as we live our lives, because we have no other choice and we might as well entertain ourselves with the things that we are interested in, or struggles and whatnot. But at the end of the day, my philosophy has always been by default, and it's a weird thing, but it's like, not why bother, but it's like, the things that we're most utterly like deranged and mad about, eh, are they that
Yeah.
really that like everlastingly,
Oh, yeah.
bad? We overblow things, and in reality, within the context of that bookend of life, most of that could go by the wayside because, frankly, I mean, it's a waste of time. But we are human, and we have to have conflict and battle because it's part of our nature. So we
Yeah.
live it. But mostly, we're just kind of like, we're kind of cruising down the highway and and
Right.
and looking at the scenery is what it is.
Yeah. And you're talking about that overblown sense of proportion. That goes the same thing for the good stuff as it does for the bad stuff. I mean, when you think about all the stuff that you just absolutely had to do when you were a kid, none of it's really all that important anymore. I mean, maybe there may be a few things, but suddenly Transformers aren't as important as they used to be. GI Joe isn't as important as it used to be. I mean, if you have $5 in your pocket, it's not burning a hole there to get out and buy the newest action figure. I mean,
Right.
it's just the priorities change. Now it's the new power tool, or it's, maybe some new furniture for the house, or it's whatever. I mean, because like right now we're on a quest for a freezer. Our freezer died. And so we've been stashing money aside, and it's time to go get a freezer to replace that freezer. And there are none to be found. It's just forget it. I mean, the whole world has bought a freezer. They got to have some place to put all those McNuggets that they bought. So, our lives
Toilet
are on
paper.
hold. Yeah.
Toilet paper. You put the toilet paper in the freezer,
That
and
must
then
be how they're keeping it fresh. Yeah.
you have a nice temperature to the wipe.
Well, you know what? Something I forgot was the fact that most freezer doors lock. So, that's, you got to guard the supply.
Do you
So there might
remember?
be something to that.
Do you remember? And by the way, I just mentioned that in the context of this, but I'm gonna try it. I'm gonna put a toilet roll in the freezer just for the heck of it and bust that puppy out. Do you remember that cartoon where the bird? I think it was a bird. He would be shamed, and then he'd automatically stick his head in the sand or whatnot.
Oh, yeah, the ostrich. Yeah.
The ostrich. It was the ostrich.
Mhm.
This whole toilet paper notion is kind of the equivalent of society has basically done what the ostrich does with toilet paper. This is our comfort. This is our little
Huh.
our little blankie. Grab some. It's become gold.
Yeah.
So people, and it's kind of like when you're on an airplane and the old saying, bend over, like they say, like they tell you, just crotch over if the plane has any issues, just bend over in your seat. When basically what's going on is they're telling you kiss your ass goodbye, my friend.
Yeah, and
There's nothing you could really do.
they're protecting the mouth, so they got the dental records. So
I mean,
but I think a lot of that has gone away. I mean, we went to the store earlier today, went grocery shopping, and because it was time, and yeah, the toilet paper is still gone, but the cleaning products are coming back. Paper towels are coming back. There was tissue. There were disposable plates. There were napkins. There was, there wasn't any toilet paper yet, but a lot of the stuff that they wiped out in lieu of toilet paper is coming back. Canned goods were back. Rice was back on the shelf. The dry beans were gone, but most everything we wanted, they had. I can only think of like one or two things that we wanted that they didn't have. I mean, people are panicking over yeast. There was yeast. There was two different kinds, the instant and the original. Most everything is coming back. So I think people are actually either they're living off what they got, or they've kind of seen the comedy in what they've been doing. But it's like we were talking about before. People react to certain situations the only way they know how, and that is to go out and buy stuff.
Yeah, this whole thing has reinforced my actual belief systems in a way.
It's reinforced a couple of things in me too, and that kind of ties in with the birthday thing and being older. And that is, some people, not a lot, not all, but there are a good number of people who are starting to realize that learning independence and self-sufficiency is important. And I don't mean growing your own food and having a bunch of chickens for the eggs and everything, but just knowing how to cook more than microwave meals. Because it's one thing to put a frozen pizza in the oven. It's another thing to take some flour, some sugar, some yeast, and make something. Or take raw meat, put it in a pan and cook it to be able to feed yourself.
See, that's where you didn't make the mathematics. There's an issue, because you could also go over to the nursery and buy yourself one of those microwave trees where they grow, and you'll have perpetual microwave.
Yeah, but that doesn't matter when the store is wiped out on chicken nuggets and frozen burritos.
Chicken nugget tree to the left.
All you've got is they can make. They're pretty safe with. They're pretty comfortable with ground beef. But you hand somebody a tri-tip roast, and they don't know what to do with it. So I think it's interested a lot more people in independence and less on community and more on self-sufficiency. I mean, it's great to say that you love bacon. All right. Can you cook it? That's another thing entirely.
That's well, see, that's totally the point. My thought process, the independence thing, because and by the way, big populated areas, the whole world as it is, and just on a psychological interactive way between people in hierarchy, sort of like professionals, and like this whole world we've built with all these different categories on multiple levels. To me, it's just brought to a forefront that a good percentage, I haven't done the calculation, but a good percentage of these meaningful, useful, actors in society could basically disappear right off the face of the earth, and we'd be none the worse off for it. There's a lot of uselessness out there in society in reference to what we want to invest in,
Right.
So people that were so important, or that, I'm just going to throw it out there. What the heck is these people here that run this joint, here in this local area doing? They're doing the the peacock thing, or what was the bird? The ostrich.
Oh yeah.
They're no better than the ostrich sticking his head in the sand, because frankly, nobody can deal with an invisible. At the end of the day, what you said, we have ourselves to take care of, and the truth of the matter is, it's ourselves to a great degree, not fully, because there is a society, but a lot of it is useless bull crap.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah. And
I could be more explicit, but we'll leave it at that.
but I mean, television, radio, and the movies, the popular culture has basically educated us since I was a kid anyway to focus on the superfluous stuff. You know, it wasn't enough to have tennis shoes. You had to have a certain brand and a certain style of shoes, or you were just ridiculed. You know, you had to have a certain type, you had to have a certain brand of blue jeans, you know, and if that red tag wasn't on the back pocket, then you were poor and your parents didn't love you, you know. So we think about the superfluous stuff. We don't really put a whole heck of a lot of emphasis, and we certainly don't teach about the important things, the independent things. You need to, number one, be able to feed yourself, you know, and your family. And I don't mean money wise, I mean the ability to physically get into the kitchen and cook a meal for your family. Because we're seeing now what's going on with, well, Megan only likes chicken nuggets, so we got to go to McDonald's and get chicken nuggets. And Jeffrey over here, he only likes cheese pizza, so we got to go over here and get cheese pizza. You can't do that right now. So I'm sorry if your child doesn't like the canned cream corn that you bought. They're going to have to eat it or they're going to be hungry, because that's the only thing you know how to cook.
And once they have enough of the hunger, they'll eat the soles off of leather shoes.
Yeah, I mean, you know, and it's, you know, I mean, there are fewer and fewer people that go out fishing and go out hunting every year, but I mean, it wasn't all that long ago. That was subsistence. That was how you ate, you know?
There's a lot of questions that and a lot of, for those that want to see it, that this situation has brought about, uncovered or unmasked, that many people already know as a matter of fact, but that it's out on display. Right. And for me, the biggest one is the usefulness of governmental, structures.
Yeah.
Not completely, but to the point where, if they were missing like they are, we'd be really, there's no frickin' difference whatsoever now. The guy that takes out a ruler to measure grass blades because locally it has, the thing has to be prim and proper and all that. Well, we could do without that guy. We could do it without there's so much there. And then there's the arrogance of people in certain positions. They're not there anymore. Or they're there, but they're at home. Well, go ahead. I see that you have.
I was gonna say my cynicism has increased with age, but I don't know. I spent so much time in and around the Army that I expect that out of government. What shocked me was what came out of private enterprises. Now, this is just me talking here, but what I'm seeing is we're not warehousing anymore. We don't warehouse supplies. When I'm hearing what's going out there, and I hear, I'll just say it up front, there is absolutely no excuse for a hospital not having gloves or masks for their staff. There is no excuse for it. There should be a minimum of a 30-day supply warehoused somewhere, stock rotated, proper stock management procedures in place. But that stuff should be warehoused because an emergency could happen at any time. They're always filling our head with Make an emergency plan, have a meeting place for the family to get together, especially out here where you're talking about wildfires, because fires can happen at any time. And as we saw with the fires last year in Paradise, California, which just basically does not exist anymore, fire burned through and wiped that entire city out. That can happen out here. They weren't prepared. And the fault lays solely on them. It's not the mask manufacturers. They're selling them as fast as they can make them. It's the hospitals for not warehousing this stuff. Now, nobody could have anticipated something like this would happen. But you would think that they would have some sort of an emergency plan in place. And do we have 30 days of supplies? Worst case scenarios, do we have the supplies to operate for 30 days with no resupply? Because we may have to.
Nobody in the world did.
Nobody in the world did. Well, I won't say nobody, because a few places did, but they're few and far in between.
Well, I mean, but see, so with private, like we've seen businesses operating like independently of whether or not the quote unquote leaders have it all figured out or not, which they don't. There's nothing figured. It's all so much bull crap. But we see these companies doing what they do, hauling supplies out to the different stores,
sure,
without the proper guidance of it's
right.
To me, that's the biggest exposure. Not just that, but the angle of like the utility and need for, the excesses of this gilded group of people that we can't live without. It's been blown. The genie is out of the lamp, and on display. And people are realizing that more and more. You hear and it's a good thing in a way. And by the way, I live in a I don't overdo myself. I've always been that way, and my dad was that way, and this living off of an extended credit and burying your head into debt is a bad idea, because there's no other way to do it in society. If you want to have nice things and stuff, and
I don't agree with that.
To do it other than saving and waiting until you have enough personally to be able to purchase a thing. But people want their things as soon as possible, and you can't just outright buy a house, and just a bunch of things. I get it, but the excesses of these power players, let's say, and arrogance of these power players, let's say, now they're very kind. And to me, it strikes hard, of hypocrisy extremely. They're so kind and patient now. And the people, because now if one person, because before, if one person couldn't pay up, they drop the hammer on them and crush them. Doesn't matter if it was grandma. Let me just say this one bit. In the past, up until right this moment, that's always been the case. But now it's like, oh, well, wait, because the problem is that the whole system is on red alert, and now the kindness is overbearing. But we
talked about this last week, and as I said before, as I said then, it's an emergency situation. You can only get so much out of a 5-pound bag. When it's empty, it's empty. And they know that if they stick 100% to the rules, they're going to have nothing. There's going to be problems. There's going to be major issues. And that's why I said all of these rules that they're setting aside, we need to examine why they're there to begin with. And maybe they're not necessary at all. So let's, take a look at it from that angle as well. If you're willing to suspend this rule and this regulation, maybe those rules and regulations are not necessary. I'll give you an example of that. Here in the state of Oregon, people were the gas station attendants. Here in the state of Oregon, it's illegal for you to pump your own gas. You cannot pump your own gas. There's an attendant there. You pull up to the pump. They come over. You tell them how much you want. They put it in your car. You pay them, and off you go. Just like it always used to be years and years ago. They have suspended that rule because the gas station attendants are just not going to work. They're afraid they're going to get it because they meet so many people during the day. So they have suspended that rule that says you can't pump your own gas. My question is this: why is that still a rule?
Because it benefits.
If it's who?
It benefits some people.
It benefits the people who have an entry level job. I will give you that. But that's like paying one guy to dig a hole and another guy to come in and fill it up again. You're not accomplishing anything. People can pump their own gas, and these people will find other jobs. There are other jobs out there. There are help wanted signs all over. Now hiring signs all over. So if it's that easy to suspend that rule, then maybe the rule needs to be examined and eliminated. You know, society didn't collapse. Gas stations aren't burning down. I think maybe it's time we revisit that. And that's just one example.
Yeah.
You know. Now, when I was talking about warehousing of supplies, I meant specifically like hospitals. Stores, they can't resupply that. They can't warehouse 30 days worth of food. You know, you can't warehouse 30 days worth of furniture. I get that. But I'm talking about something that's critical. You don't jump in an ambulance and take off with a half-empty ambulance. There needs to be the supplies there for it. And you need to have enough supplies, especially for medical. You have to have enough stuff warehoused for a worst case scenario because, brother, this is it. You know, you've got to put stuff away for a rainy day because it's raining right now.
Another issue to add to the thing is, as an example, Miami. So Miami has limited real estate, and for the past X amount of years, big groups have been coming in and eating up real estate. And Miami has a very sort of like unbalanced um, gap as far as housing is concerned, ratio to renters' ability to acquire, a house or apartment, and the pricing, and it's all due to the cycle of these people inflating the market and government. Everybody puts their hand in the basket and pulls out some money and treats, and there's a lot of examples of it, but there's nowhere for people to go in a place like this. And once you buy up and make a huge condominium or a huge towering, inferno, let's say, the people that come in have to have money, and they usually come from out of state or out of the country. And just last week, they've busted a bunch of people that come in from, other countries throughout South America with drug money, let's say, and they pour that money into different, things like that, real estate. And they were mentioning how that causes the crisis, and the crisis is real. And I've noticed that regardless of whether they found that illegality or not, our local leaders haven't thought of that crisis. In the meantime, they're building all these awful, towers everywhere, and they haven't planned for the citizens that are actually the citizens. No, because it's all a money grab, and so all these things. That's just like a little example, the dots can be connected or not, but all these things that they take care of, this that's going on now is exposing a lot of how really useless and just basically getting rich and fat off the system they are. So a lot of people are realizing this, and it's being talked about everywhere.
Yeah.
And the whole thing of society and hierarchies and all that, it's always going to be. But my thing is the excesses. How far are you willing to go, and how fat and plump are you willing to go on somebody else's, efforts? On your efforts, go for it, have fun. But people, this kind of responsibility should be a little bit more, and they're not going to be, because this is exposing a lot of inequity and overpowered sort of, figures in the system.
Well, it's like I said, we focus on the superfluous. They want the pretty facade down the boulevard. They're not interested in the people who live on the side street back behind. It's the focus on the superfluous. And we've been basically educated that that's the way it's supposed to be. So long as it looks nice, it can be a piece of trash. It just has to look nice. And my position of authority up here in this government hierarchy is predicated on how nice it looks. And you need to know how important I am, because see what I did. I made the street look pretty. I made the street look nice. And we don't have just gray sidewalks anymore. They've all been stamped and they're dyed red so it looks like bricks and what have you. See, aren't I worth my salary? But when push comes to shove and it's something happens, there's a crisis, whether it be big or little, they just don't know what to do.
Well, they don't have the power. In the end, they really, well, they're such grandstanders.
And
it's disgusting, actually.
And I will not accept the excuse that the system doesn't allow this. Don't give me that excuse. You are the system. Fix it or get out. If you can't or won't fix the system that won't allow you to do X, Y, or Z, you are the problem. Get out, make room for somebody who can/will. You know, ultimately, we don't work for them. They work for us. And if you're a big enough thorn in their side, you will get noticed. You know, and at least get answers. One person may not be able to change things, but if you can scream loud enough, pretty soon it's not one person, is what I'm getting at.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I think that this scenario now is probably the best, and it's within the horror of what this is. I think it's the best, because see, here's the thing: people are realizing, well, wait a second. So you're gonna send us a check, depending on how many people in your household, of 1,200, and it goes up with children and the wife and the whole thing. You know, you're sending that, and there's room for another one, let's say. You know, and what about before? It was so critical. You know, you're willing to take this leap, and I'm not suggesting that they should, because they're playing with other people's money. But what I'm saying is that they could be a little bit less stringent, because there's a lot of poor people that basically live scratching, by,
mm-hmm.
And one could argue, oh well, that's their problem, this and that. But when it comes to, for instance, the crisis with the housing in 2008, people did go down and purchase things that they weren't really set up to purchase, and they lost their butts. But the banks had no place to give them those
loans. No. They were required to give those loans.
Let me get to that. Yes.
Okay.
The government. So, as I was saying, the banks had no business giving those out, but the government had done away with the Glass-Steagall Act, which allowed crossing of institutions to purchase from the Wall Street and so on. But I don't want to get the point is that the banks got a bailout on the citizenry's off of their backs, because at the end anything because I see your head your gears turning. At the end, anything that the government pays for comes from the citizenry. Government has nothing,
right,
other than what comes out of it. So we pay for it all anyhow. And if we don't pay for it immediately, it's pushed to the next generation, and it increases the disparaging amount of what we owe per individual in the United States, prolonged into the future. future generations
Yeah.
less able to extend the amount of money. Your dollar loses strength, and the whole.
Right.
So, but they were quite willing to that solution, but there was no mercy in comparison to what they did for the institutions. And you could argue
Oh,
we
there
need.
was a lot of mercy. There was a lot of mercy for people.
You could argue that you have to save the institutions because that's the foundation. This and that, but there's still a system that favors in one direction, and that direction is never for the lowly, let's say. So in that point, this that's happening now, and their willingness to, because you need the employees to go to the stores and work because they sell to the customers, and you need the customers to purchase, and the customers need to go and pay their rent to their own houses, and if they have a cell phone, they need to do this, and everybody needs money, everybody. But they don't. They have never been so kind as they're being right now.
They have to be. They have to be. But it's an emergency situation. Look, I agreed with you. We just spent 15 minutes talking about this again. I agree with you 100% on that. But, okay, now what? I mean, it's an emergency situation. They had to do something because they don't want the torches and pitchforks on their front yards. They have to do something. But and that's why I'm saying a lot of this superfluous crap that they're suspending, maybe that needs to be looked at and just done away with. But what next? I agree with you 100%.
I think it's the biggest.
Without going back through the whole bailout and the too big to fail crap, which was 100% crap. You let them go through bankruptcy, they restructure, they reorganize, they get rid of the leaders that put them in this mess, and then they come out stronger. I won't even get into business. Bankruptcy does not mean insolvency. It doesn't mean the doors close and everybody's fired. Bankruptcy means a reorganization. They cannot take on any more debt, but they still have to pay off the old debt. There was a lot of mercy shown to the people who lost their homes. There was a lot of mercy. There were people who did lose their homes. They gave up their homes either against their will, or a number of people just walked away and said, to heck with it, I'm not paying it. They still got letters of forgiveness for the debt that they owed, because that was the deal that the government made with the banks. There are people that walked away from homes owing $200,000 that got letters of forgiveness for that debt. They no longer owe that $200,000. Whereas before they would have. Then the government, if you were given a letter of forgiveness, that's taxable income. The government forgave the taxes on those letters of forgiveness. So the people who lost their homes weren't punished 2, 3, and 4 times for losing their homes. So there was quite a bit of mercy shown to the folks who went through that stuff.
I guess I'll say this, and of course I agree with what you said, that we fought the British over much less.
Mm-hmm.
And in my opinion, rightly so.
True.
And so to me, this is a very, very, very striking moment on that level, and that's why I bring it up. But there's so many other levels to it, and it is quite current. It is quite the current affair. But on another level, not as direct or whatever, or controversial. Although I think that it's too late for that.
Well, I have one more thing to say on that line, but go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say that's why I'm talking about independence and self-sufficiency. To hell with what the government's doing. I don't need the government. I don't care what the government's doing. Now I'm in a position to where I'm not relying on that $1,200 from the government. I did not lose my job. I'm retired. I know a lot of people, especially in the service industry, did lose their job and it trickles down, because you can't go to a restaurant and sit down and have a meal. So that waitress or server as they want to be called today, and the busser and the dishwasher and the cook aren't bringing in as many hours per week as they used to, and they're not bringing in the tips. So this is closed circuit for everybody out there who really, really, really wants to help these people. Start tipping again. Start tipping again. 20% minimum. They babysit you. Start tipping again. That'll get off of that soapbox, okay?
Oh no, that's good.
So those people definitely had a reduction in their income. People in industries that have been deemed non-essential, they've had a reduction. They need some help.
I think the government double dips and triple dips on taxes way too much.
But I agree with you there. But the thing that people seem to be forgetting, and when people start screaming about how are we going to pay for this, to hell with you. It's not your money. The government isn't giving you money. The government is giving you your money back. It was never theirs to begin with. So forget about how they're going to pay for it. It was your money to start with.
Well, that's a bit of a problem though, because that would be fine if there was a cap on the amount that the government extracted, but there's not a cap. These people are like drunken sailors.
Oh, sure.
No offense to sailors, but if it were like just, and there's a cap, fine. But the thing is that there is no limit to which they will, go for. And we end up suffering that. And yes, that's why I say, good that these people get their money back, because it's money that they've extracted anyhow. And they pocket whatever they pocket for whatever ridiculous thing that they think is useful and necessary, like the stupid roundabout over here, or just a million things. It's just, gross, over exaggerated gouging of people. And so that's why I'd say take back the 1,200 and eliminate the taxation.
Okay.
Or whatever time or at whatever percentage where people rough it out on their own, minus the suffering that is inflicted by force through that tax.
And that's exactly what I'm saying. If it's so easy to give those people that $1,200 back that was theirs to begin with, you didn't need it to start. It's time to start prioritizing and get rid of the superfluous BS. I'm going to be bold here and probably cheese off a lot of people. They need to shut down the National Endowment for the Arts. They need to close the Kennedy Center, which is nothing more than just a place for these politicians to go to make themselves feel better. If it was self-supporting, leave it open. If it needs a subsidy, close it down. Same thing for the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. Sesame Street is probably the single most lucrative franchise on the face of this earth. It alone can fund all of PBS. But they still get taxpayer dollars for the McNeil-Lehrer Report and other shows that nobody watches. So you get rid of the superfluous. I couldn't tell you anybody on it. I don't know why it's called the McNeil-Lehrer Report. The only time I watch PBS is when they play something decent, and that's Monday nights on Antiques Roadshow, and when they're having their semi-annual Beg Fest and decide to play Stevie Ray Vaughan at Austin City Limits. But the only time they do that is when they're trying to get money out of you. Every other time, it's about, look at this caterpillar over here in Eastern Oregon. It lives off of this one particular sagebrush. Well, good for the caterpillar. I'm not watching it. I'm sorry. Now I'll get off of that soapbox and say people want art. They can make their own art. We shouldn't be subsidizing it. And that's just one small thing. There are bigger fish to fry.
I don't think that we're going to, I don't know for sure, but I don't think that things will be the same after this on a variety of levels. eventually things will get back to normal, but there'll be a lot of different changes to things. But I don't want to underestimate the ability of people to forget and
Oh
continue
yeah,
on.
big time, big time.
So it's a kind of a thing. But if I had to think within people that do the thinking for a living or are so inclined, um, people that are aware of the consequences of what's gone down on the economic level, financial, etc. I don't know that people are going to make the same type of decisions when it comes to putting money, investing money, and so on in the same exact places in the same exact way. I think that
I
things are
think
going
you're
to
right. I think you're right. I think a lot of people are looking at that, and a lot of people are looking into the way they've lived and the way they've thought of the world and the way they've thought of their lives. And that, maybe learning how to cook. I know I keep coming back to that, but to me, that just seems so ridiculous. A mutual friend of ours standing in line at the grocery store and a lady behind him having a chat with another older lady behind her with a package of chicken breasts in her hand saying, "How do you cook this?" There's no instructions on it. She really did not know how to cook chicken. We're not teaching people how to be independent and how to think and act for themselves. And I think a lot of people are seeing that now, and they're going to be scrambling to learn. I mean, I'm going to go out on a limb here. On YouTube for the last 2 years, the most popular, new, and exciting channels were these channels where people sit and react to music videos and bands and YouTube videos and stuff like that. I'm going to go out here on a limb and say for the next 2 years, the most popular YouTube channels are going to be the cooking channels that start with the basics. This is how you make biscuits. This is how you fry eggs. This is how you cook bacon on a stovetop. Did you know you could make popcorn in a Dutch oven? Things like that. Do you know what a Dutch oven is? And don't go to the Urban Dictionary and look it up. That kind of thing.
I can answer that one right away.
I bet you could. But I mean, there are a lot of people who are into the new homesteading thing. And I think that's great. I mean, if you want to get yourself a few acres and you want to run some goats and have some chickens and collect eggs and milk your goats and stuff like that, great, terrific. I'm all for it. And I wish you nothing but the best. And I mean that sincerely. But for the people who live in apartments who don't have that kind of luxury, you still got to be able to feed yourself. And I think that's coming home right now to roost. And they're figuring this out. That, yeah, you can go out and you can spend $10 for frozen food, or you can spend $250 and cook it yourself. Especially when the checks start getting smaller and smaller here for a while. Because let's be honest, this is going to be on until midsummer, easily.
This year's pretty much down the drain.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's, as you were saying earlier, we're seeing how little a lot of these people really honestly mean to us. I mean, yeah, it sucks that NASCAR is not racing. It sucks that baseball is not happening, and hockey and football are in question, you know? So yeah, that sucks. There aren't any concerts and nobody's going to the theaters. But what that's doing is that's forcing people to reevaluate and see what they can do with one another on their own. And I think folks are going to start returning to the importance of that. And because at the end of the day, with all of this other superfluous stuff that is not necessary for life, it doesn't mean anything. And all we've got is one another. That's all we have. So maybe it's time to make the best of it, make the most of it, and, learn a little bit of independence and self-sufficiency.
And also big city places, there's not a lot of room. So where I'm at, I was joking with someone earlier on, where I'm at, the problem is that, well, where do I go? Like, let's say there's a zombie apocalypse type thing. I'm using the word just for
Sure.
for a fact. But or wait, let's we don't maybe there's a zombie apocalypse, but in a situation, I'm pretty much what's the word screwed because I mean, like, and I told the person I forget who I was talking to. I have bars on my windows, so that'll help me that'll kill about half an hour probably before they get through. But in a situation like this, we're done in.
Yeah.
No matter what, um, you have to be out in the country to be able
And,
to.
and you can only go in one direction, and that's out into the Everglades. And that's the start of just about half of the zombie movies I've ever seen is people running out to the Everglades. And the other sad part of that is everybody else in Miami knows that. And they're going to try to get there before you can.
Well,
The only thing you got going for you is you're closer.
That's actually, I'll be honest with you, most people in Miami are it's quite the mystery, the Everglades, because alligators. And to them, alligators it's like the equivalent of sharks in Jaws. They see a human and they jump at you and stuff and all that. And the truth is different than that. But
Wait. You're saying that's not how it is.
no.
Okay.
What, the gators run after human beings? No, it's not. So, but they think it is.
Uh-huh.
So chances are that the Everglades would be a last ditch effort. They'll try to go up north to get out of Florida and head towards Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi in order to escape the trap that this is, because you can't go in the ocean. And hell, if people are going to get on a boat and go to Cuba, that's
yeah, y'all have done that thing, but made that trip before.
yeah, but in reverse.
Some of them.
So the thing is that ain't happening. So in a situation like this, you're pretty much you're chopped liver. But on the heels of that, I did want to mention that there's a dude on YouTube, which I found, and this goes more towards, although it's kind of loosely related, but it kind of it ties in a way because it shows the sort of like what people value as opposed to what a more reasonable human might value, but what crowds value. So there's this guy that he proposed to trick Instagram and get tons of followers. And he said he noticed, and he has a video out on it, and he noticed that people love these stars posing in behind cars with women all around them, chains, and like in exotic locations and stuff. And then he noticed that these people, and on the runway, the red carpets and whatnot, and he noticed that all these people get all these views on Instagram because of that. And so he said, well, I'm going to use my skills in Photoshop, and I'm going to change out my scene and my car. He took a green screen and propped it over his car, and he leaned up against it, and he turned it into like a Lamborghini. And while he was wearing some good stuff, he'd take a watch, from a good expensive watch from another photo, and he'd put it on his perfectly, and like he'd just make the scene with a bunch of girls all around him down the red carpet. And he was people were commenting on his stuff. People were, propagating his material. I mean, it was working. And it just goes to show the shallowness.
Mm-hmm.
You know
of
what I'm
people.
saying?
Yeah.
Of people. And it's just a societal. What?
And the gullibility.
Well, the gullibility, because it's really all like, look, I get it. A pretty, let's say an Instagram model, that's a very attractive physical thing. But I'll be honest, and I don't know if, I mean, I can't speak for anybody else, but to me, if there's a pretty lady, that's basically, I don't want to say that that's enough, but visually I'm like, holy smokes, well, but as time goes on, you realize after so many failures like I've had, you realize that it's actually what's inside.
Mm-hmm.
And it might sound even ridiculous and like, oh, well, I've heard that before, but it's what's inside that actually makes you want to continue a thing. The shallow things, be it car, materialistic, clothing, this, and that. If there's no character in the human being, if there's no dignity, in the human, if the person is a complete psychopath, let's say, or selfish person, or all these traits that you could say, then it's useless. It's just a shell
Mhm.
of what's attractive.
Yeah.
It's kind of like that French dip can that I ate. I looked at it and I was like, holy smokes, I need some of that. But
Yeah.
after I ate half of the can, I have it slushing around my stomach. So it's kind of that sort of thing.
I mean, again, we're attracted to the superfluous. It's the superfluous that, and we have been trained to respond to that. Some of it's positive, some of it's negative, but we recognize it, we see it, we respond to it. I mean, you can take the same guy, put him in Levi's and a t-shirt, stand him next to a truck, and as you're saying, put him in an Armani suit next to a Lamborghini, you're going to get two responses for the same guy. You know, if he's got a his arm around a woman and she's in a nice sundress with a sun hat standing next to him next to that pickup truck, that's going to get a different response than if she's in a bikini standing next to him in that Lambo.
Mm-hmm.
So, but we're trained for that. Now there's no accounting for taste. Some people might prefer the truck to the Lambo, but they're going to get two different responses, is my point.
These attractive things, I'm trying to sort of wed to the attractiveness of these daddy and mommy figures that organize society.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, if the substance isn't there, and it's obviously, in my opinion at least, if you calculate it up, it doesn't seem like the interest lies in the well-being. It seems like just going along to get along and pocketing a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
and it's all look at me, how vote for me, and then at the end of the day, there's nothing that. It's just it's a sick thing in my opinion.
No, I agree with it, and you have to be a little bit of a megalomaniac to even want the job. So
I
you know
agree
what,
with that.
and in this regard, I think the ancient Greeks had it right, because their system, I'm trying to remember what it was called. I can't remember what it was called. It was a true democracy. However, the way their government leaders were chosen was basically by lottery. It was property owners only. And it was by lottery. Boom, you're going to be the representative for these people for the next term. And that was it. It's just like jury duty. So, imagine, pick a celebrity up there, and the balls are in the barrel and tumbled out, and boom, Eloy Escagedo, you are the new Secretary of Defense.
French dip for all for the next year.
And then boom, or you are the congressman from your district in Florida for the next 2 years.
Right.
They can't be bought. They can't be lobbied until they're in office. They can't be influenced in any way to try to rig the system to get their name in there. And it totally eliminates any form of corruption as far as you being elected, because you're not elected. You're chosen by chance. And you go spend a single 2-year term, then your term's up. You are no longer on the list. You can't serve again. That's it. That was the system the ancient Greeks had. And I think there's a lot of merit into it. A merit in that, rather.
I want to see what is going to happen when, everything is said and done. And if it goes the way of economic distress as it is, and these people come a knocking that need to feed their big, jaws with frickin', the people's hard-earned cash. I want to see how lenient, and at that point, because you can't draw water from a stone, as they say.
True.
This whole thing to me, and frankly, I'm quite hermit like anyhow,
Yeah.
but most people are not
Well,
apparently, and
we
this
were
is very
hermits. We were hermits before it was cool, man. We are on the cutting edge of societal evolution. And that's all there is to it. We were hermits before it was cool. And, I don't know if it's good, bad, or indifferent in what that says. Linda and I were talking about this. I remember if it was earlier today or if it was later yesterday, but we haven't made many changes to our lives at all. And the only changes we have made are basically of convenience. Yeah, we can't go sit down in a restaurant and eat, but we didn't do that every day anyhow. But we can still call the restaurant and order this, this, and this, and then we drive up and pick it up. And
right.
yes, we tip and come home and eat.
That is a good observation, actually.
But other than that, if we need to go to the grocery store, we go to the grocery store. If
That
we need to
that's
go get gas, we go get gas.
that is a good observation. Actually, that's an important observation. In Within reason, and there's a lot of wiggle room. Nothing's really changed on the date. A lot has changed, but as far as availability of things, it's an inconvenience not to. Thus far, by the
Mm-hmm.
way, thus far.
Right.
What are we? 3 weeks into it now? A month?
Thereabouts. Yeah. I think we're 4 weeks.
4 weeks into it?
I think we are. Yeah. I got to tell you, they're all starting to blur. So I really don't know. We may be only 2 weeks.
Well, I mean, so far there's been lack of this and that, but it's come back with the toilet paper, and you're able to grab of this and that. But the austerity of it all is frightening to people around the world. But there's people in, let's say, third world countries that this is like our austerity would be
Yeah.
rich.
I was just going to ask you that. How austere is it really?
Yeah.
You know, we're complaining right now that there's no toilet paper. 120 years ago, there was no such thing. How austere is it really? You know,
Yeah.
we're still, what Netflix and chill doesn't mean anything anymore. I mean, we're still doing that. We're still binge watching our favorite shows. Maybe that's what it is. They've run out of shows to watch, and they might actually have to turn on that thing in the living room they've been ignoring for a while. I don't know.
4 weeks, says
Four
Roger.
weeks. Okay. All right. Thank you, Roger. I appreciate that. But I don't know. I know there are a lot of industries that have been hit hard. I know that. But when it comes to day-to-day life, I mean, unless your career, I don't know, unless you spent most of your time outside of your house, I don't know how much of your life has really changed. I mean, Linda and I thought it was absolutely ridiculous when people were talking about, wait a minute, the schools are closing. What are we going to do with our kids? I don't know. How about be a parent? You know? And now with all of the kids being at home and parents having to take a more active role in their education, I think quite a few more of them are going to see that maybe the teachers weren't the problem after all. Maybe the school wasn't as messed up as they thought it was.
Oh, I think the school was messed up.
And well, I do too, but not to the degree that they thought it was. Maybe you just don't know how to discipline your children. Maybe you were never in control of your household. Maybe you don't know how to be a parent, or you're just not a very good one. Now, not all of that can be blamed on them, because you can only teach what you've been taught. And if their parents weren't very good parents, well, it just rolls downhill. It
Yeah, it's a
just,
chain. It's a chain until someone breaks that chain.
yeah.
You know.
So, it's kind of a, okay, now you've got to be a parent. Now you've got to be an educator. And maybe it's time you learned how to do that. And Lord knows there's plenty of resources online to find that out, you know? I mean, I don't know. There's a lot of things that we can go into. There's a lot of topics that we can discuss, but I think what it comes down to is people are starting to realize that the for the community thing is a good thing to aspire to, but maybe you've got to take care of yourself and be able to take care of yourself first. Then you can start worrying about the community, because community is great, but it doesn't mean nothing if you can't feed yourself.
Yeah, in a case like a big city like this, or if you don't have a farm wherever the heck you are, or I guess urban sort of like you're gonna need the chickens. You're gonna need
Sure.
certain other animals. I can't say a cow, but that'd be good because then I would just there's certain things that are out of reach for people in big
Sure.
cities, and those people in New York that
Sure.
live one layer on top of another layer on top of
Yeah.
another for as far as you could. I mean, that is
They are
there's
kind of
no
hosed.
yeah, they're completely in a crappy situation. I
Right.
just you know I
But
mean, it is what it is. It's a weird thing that all this that we're seeing. It's surreal. It's really surreal.
yeah.
You know.
Yeah. And I'm not suggesting everybody go out and buy a 2-acre farm. I'm not suggesting that at all. Some people may want to, others may not. I mean, I'll be honest with you. We're here on a fifth of an acre, and it's probably about as much as I want. I don't want another 2-acre parcel or even a 1-acre parcel. It's just more than I want to work. I don't want to work that hard anymore.
I
You know,
understand that.
I don't have to.
Right. Right.
And like I said, there's a lot of people out there that are starting the new homesteads, and more power to them. I love it, and I hope they're successful. I genuinely do. And if you can do that, if you've been thinking about do that, maybe this is the incentive to start looking a little bit harder at it.
And
Maybe
there's canned. You could also work up to by storing stuff, so you don't necessarily have
exactly.
to have like there's options within that.
Sure.
And in fact, this is a good moment to mention that boy, if Steve could throw that link out, that'd be good. But we're sponsored by Harneal Media,
Hmm.
and that's harnealmedia.com. And if you need a website, well, you could go over and message Steve at harnealmedia.com, and he'll get a website up and running for you. Best prices on the internet, and you can check that out because it's and great service as well. But there's another site that I wanted to throw out, which was worth checking out. But if he's not around, then we won't.
Yeah, I think Steve's there, but I don't know if he has the capability to throw a link in the chat or not. Did we make him a moderator?
I'm not sure.
Well, we will fix that later on. No, he is not a moderator. I will get a link from Steve for his Surviving Emergencies website, and survivingemergencies.com. Steve, is that it? If it is, I will get it put up there. Survivingemergencies.com. There are a lot of survival tips in there, and we're not saying you need to go into full-on survivor mode. Okay, that is the one. We're not saying you need to go into full-on survivor mode, but if this has taught us anything, it's that, maybe having a few extra weeks of canned goods in the back of the pantry is a good thing.
Oh, for
And,
sure.
maybe having a few, instead of waiting until you put the last roll on the spindle, you stash 2 rolls in the back and go buy another package of TP, because you never know.
You could also take a ream of actual paper,
Mhm.
the reams of paper for printers, and you could soak them for 5 days and make pulp. And then if you rinse them and you flatten them out and let them dry on clothes hangers, you can have a nice, and you can cut it with an X-Acto knife. You can have
Would a
actual, yeah, but
would
don't bend them because they'll snap like crackers.
would
So you
would
have to.
would would one of those hand crank pasta machines come in handy for this? No,
No, what you do is you take the shredded pulp of the paper and you just whack it on your butt and until it works out for the best. Maybe that's not a survival tip. Let's just leave
maybe
that
it's
as
not.
a
Yeah,
question mark.
let's put a big question mark on that. So no, Al, the link did not go through. You guys can't post links in the chat.
We've
No,
got
you're
this
not
on
banned. You're
we've got
just
this
not a
on lock.
moderator.
Sorry. We've got this on lockdown here, folks.
It's it. It's just Eloy and I. But we'll fix that. We're gonna make Steve a moderator so he can post links and stuff like that. Because I do want him to start posting links for Harneal Media when we talk about it. There is a link in the description box to this show. But
Well, we also have a website, and that is trampledunderfootpodcast.com. And we have done about 86, 87 really interesting and fun episodes, and on a variety of subjects, actually. They're very entertaining. And of course, we'd say that because we're the ones doing it. But truly,
you know what is the truth, man? Because I mean, when you stop and think about it, we started out episode number 1. We talked about the Beatles. We talked about Woodstock. I mean, we've talked about all kinds of stuff. We've talked about you growing up in Miami. We've talked about me living in the Nevada desert. We've talked about my adventures in the military. We've talked about your adventures as an airboat operator, tour guide out in the Everglades, which still just freaks me the heck out, man. That would be cool to me. I mean, when I was a 6-year-old, that would be a dream job, you know?
It was pretty cool.
Because we talked about that on an episode. He talked about Bonanza from the aspect of a kid growing up in Miami. And I talked about Flipper from the point of view of a kid growing up on the West Coast.
Yeah.
And the airboats and the alligators and stuff, that was adventure to me. Him, it was right down the road. Anyway, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt that, but we got all kinds of stuff on trampledunderfootpodcast.com. Hit the Wayback Machine, and you can go all the way back to episode 1 and just binge listen. Not a bad idea right about now. You know that?
I think so. That's what I do in my time away from the computer.
You're the guy. Cool. Oh, we also have a Facebook page. Head over to Facebook. Look for Trampled Underfoot Podcast on Facebook. Give us a thumbs up. Give us show suggestions or something you'd like for us to talk about. Something you'd like for us to stop talking about. We do talk a lot about music. I'll agree with that, but we haven't in a while. So maybe we'll get back to normal pretty soon. Trampled Underfoot Podcast on Facebook.
So, folks, I'll tell you what. Boy, I couldn't help but Billy just popped up and says, I have a water hose. I'm good.
Yeah.
And honestly, it's like running water. What better? I mean, see that we're here to offer solutions, folks.
That's right.
It's common sense solutions, actually.
Your neighbors may regret putting up chain link fence in the backyard, but that's their problem. You didn't do it.
That's right. So yeah, folks, thanks for hanging out with us. We enjoy our time here, and we will catch you guys next week, and we're gonna be consistent with the show. So and we'll talk a little bit of this, a little bit of that. Who knows what we'll be talking about next week, but be safe, and we hope you enjoyed it, and let us know if you have any thoughts on topics. We'd appreciate that, because we're quite willing to explore what ideas you might have, so you could leave that answer over on the Trampled Underfoot podcast on Facebook. Yes, that's the ticket.
We also have a contact us link on trampledunderfootpodcast.com, sponsored by Harneal Media. And you can send us a message. Go ahead. Give it a shot. We might even answer. But until next week, thanks again for hanging with us. Y'all be good, be safe, be careful. We're all in this together, and at the end of the day, we're all we've got. So thanks very much for hanging out with us. And until next week, have a good one.
All right. Bye-bye.